section because it's just It is 6 o'clock, and I will call this City of Lacey City Council meeting to order. If you are able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And with that, it looks like we have an agenda, an amended agenda. Can I get a motion?
Move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of that motion, please say aye.
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 And that motion passes unanimously. The first item on our agenda is our public recognitions and presentations, and we have a 2022 Police Department Award highlights, which will be delivered by the Chief. Chief Almada.
Good evening, Deputy Mayor and Honorable Council and council members online. Thank you for having me today to let me talk about your police department. So we recognized our officers on March 16th with an awards and recognition ceremony here in council chambers. Just to put this into context, policing never stops. So of course on the day of the awards ceremony, mere 3 hours for the ceremony, we have a SWAT call out because another jurisdiction identified a suspect in our city, was turned into a barricaded suspect. I was notified. I said, okay, you got 2 hours to fix it. Let's go. Actually, I gave them 3 hours. They did it in 2. So pretty impressive. Got them in custody, and we were able to still go on with the award ceremony. So good stuff.
Awesome.
So we'll talk about the awards just briefly. Our top medal, the Medal of Valor, is the highest recognition of outstanding officer achievement presented by the department. Medal of Valor will be awarded to members of the department who distinguish themselves by conspicuous bravery and/or heroism involving other persons present where hostile action and extreme personal danger is involved. The Bravery Medal may be awarded to members of the department who perform an act resulting in the saving of a human life, protecting the community, or effecting an arrest with great risk to their personal safety, but not quite as the level qualifying as a nominee for the Medal of Valor. Commendation awards may be presented to a member of the department or a group of employees for outstanding effort on a particular case, assignment, or police-related activity. Distinguished Service Medal may be awarded to members of the department who exhibit unusual and consistent thoroughness, conscientiousness, determination, and initiative in the performance of their duties over a period of time, or who by their action bring honor and distinction to the department. The Exceptional Service Award may be awarded to persons once a year per division, but is not mandatory. The Exceptional Service Award is granted to any employee or to an employee who has distinguished themselves through efforts above and beyond the call of duty, resulting in the improvement of the department and who consistently exemplify the values of the department in their actions and work product. Additional recognitions during the ceremony included Inspirational Partner Award, which is in the name of Tina Griswold, an officer of our department who perished with the Lakewood officers. The Gerald Abernathy Volunteer Award, the Employee of the Year Award, our Crime Stoppers Awards, service awards for milestones of 25 years, 20, and 15 years of service to the city. And we had a promotion to sergeant and a retirement. Some of the significant events that were identified this year, January 20, 2022, during domestic violence arrest, there was the attempted homicide of 2 of our officers. March 31st, 2022, the Capital Metro Independent Investigations Team of an outside jurisdiction's officer-involved shooting. The June 20th motel identity theft investigation. The July 3rd, 2022 shooting and homicide investigation. The August 22nd of last year, Capital Metro Independent Investigation of an officer-involved shooting occurring in another jurisdiction. The August 30th motel shooting and homicide investigation, and October 16th, 2022, domestic violence, kidnapping, and attempt homicide investigation. In summary, we awarded 1 Medal of Valor, 1 Medal of Bravery, 1 Distinguished Service Medal, 2 Exceptional Service Awards, 1 Employee of the Year, 4 Chiefs Awards, 3 Inspirational Partners, a total of 54 commendations, 2 Crime Stopper Awards. We identified folks with their service awards. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And again, 1 retirement and 1 promotion. So January 20, 2022. So I'll call your attention to this incident that approximately on January 20th of last year, at approximately 8 o'clock in the evening, Corporal Stansberry and Officer Joe responded to a domestic disturbance at a resident in the Horizon Point neighborhood of Lacey. The female victim had called, reporting that she had been assaulted, and she had fled to a neighbor's home with her children. Corporal Stansberry and Officer Joe responded to the 911 call, established probable cause to arrest the victim's husband for assault, domestic violence. As you know, that is a mandated arrest. If you know where the suspect is within a certain amount of time, they knew exactly where he was, so they were mandated to go make that arrest. Corporal Stansberry and Officer Joe attempted to contact the suspect at his residence and speak to him about the incident. Unbeknownst to the officers, he had armed himself with a 9mm pistol just as prior to their arrival. Corporal Stansberry was nearby as Officer Joe spoke with the suspect, who was becoming uncooperative. Officer Joe attempted to place the suspect under arrest, and the suspect immediately began physically resisting. The suspect's action escalated and became a physical altercation with Corporal Stansberry and Officer Joe. During this time, the suspect produced a semi-automatic handgun and began firing multiple rounds, striking Officer Joe in his body armor and at Corporal Stansberry. Corporal Stansberry fled for nearby cover, as did Officer Joe. The suspect tracked the movements across the yard of Corporal Stansberry, firing multiple rounds at Corporal Stansberry. Corporal Stansberry was eventually able to find cover and engage the armed suspect until the end of the incident. During this incident, the suspect fired approximately 12 to 15 rounds that you'll see in the following clip. This was both at Officer Joe and Corporal Stansberry, showing his intent to take the lives of both officers. Officer Joe and Corporal Stansberry's courageous actions, along with their training and sheer will to survive, led to the most favorable outcome possible in this deadly encounter. Corporal Stansberry and Officer Joe distinguished themselves by conspicuous bravery and heroism in the face of hostile action and extreme personal danger. For his actions, Corporal Stansberry was awarded the Medal of Valor. For his actions, Officer Joe was awarded the Bravery Medal. Also identified in this photo, go back one, please, is telecommunications operator Fritz Riddle. And he works for Thurston County Communications. He has as a dispatcher, also known as a telecommunicator. He was on the air on the primary channel during this incident, and he was described as being proficient, calm, and conducted himself as a professional during the entire incident, with multiple officers causing chaotic radio traffic. Telecommunicator Riddle was able to understand the needs of the officers and send the appropriate response. In the words of Corporal Stansbury, I have worked with Fritz for many years throughout my career. Fritz is a consistent example of dispatching excellence, and I appreciate his efforts during this life and death situation, keeping law enforcement officers safe. For his efforts on this evening, I award him a Chief's Commendation. If I can set up the following clip, it's from a Ring video. What is shown is the suspect's driveway. To the right of the frame, out of frame, is the porch where the two officers contact the suspect. What you'll hear is Officer Joe knocking on the door, attempting to contact the suspect. The suspect eventually comes to the door after being talked to a couple of times. About 45 seconds in, you'll start to hear the scuffle, and then the fight, commands being given. Then you'll start hearing a series of gunfire. The first round hits Officer Joe in the vest. During that time, both officers attempt to retreat from the battle and find cover. The suspect, you'll see, come up the right side of the picture and cross towards the back of the first SUV, continually firing at Officer Stansbury as he's going across the front yard. If we can play that, please. There's no audio? Well, that's a problem.
Ring.
You get to about 45 seconds or so. It doesn't appear to be playing. Oh, there it goes. Those bright flashes of the suspect firing at Officer Stansbury. So, all right.
Chief, is that another residential home in the background?
Yes, this is the Horizon Point neighborhood. Very highly,
Pretty dense.
very dense, yeah. They're all close together homes. So in addition on this incident, we had numerous officers respond. This ranges from sergeants to officers to the chaplain to our evidence technician, on and on, frankly, corporals and officers. We had 18 officers that were awarded commendations for their response to this incident. Officers who arrived on scene attempted life-saving efforts with the downed suspect for a very long time until fire responded. We were pretty heroic in what they did, and it tried to save this gentleman after everything had transpired. Unfortunately, he had suffered a mortal wound. That was found to be self-inflicted by the coroner. We'll move on to the next incident, please, July 3rd. On July 3rd, 2022, numerous Lacey police officers provided security for the City of Lacey's Fireworks Festival that took place at Rainier Vista Park. This festival had just ended, and police officers were deploying to strategic locations to assist pedestrians and motor vehicles to leave the area. At approximately 11 p.m., Thurston County Communications advised of gunshots being reported near the baseball fields on Parkside Drive. Lacey police officers responded to the south side of this park in the area of the fireworks command post. From the area of the fireworks command post. A short time later, aid was requested for a gunshot victim. Again, life-saving efforts were performed by officers on scene. A large group of family and onlookers were beginning to congregate in the area and became very hostile towards the officers as they provided aid to the victim. Lacey police officers worked to secure the scene, preserve evidence, and calm the crowd while life-saving efforts were being performed. A short time later, paramedics arrived at the scene and took over life-saving efforts, which were unfortunately unsuccessful, and the victim was pronounced at the scene. The officers had already worked approximately 8 to 9 hours during the festival and now initiated a long-term crime scene and homicide investigation that went on for at least continuously for another 18 hours and then on to the following days. Lacey police detectives took over the homicide investigation. Detectives and patrol officers worked together on the ensure the scene was processed and all necessary evidence and witness statements were gathered. A suspect was quickly identified and captured several days later by the Lacey Police Department. Based upon the excellent work of the detectives, officers, and staff, all who participated in this investigation, the suspect recently took a plea deal and has been sentenced to prison. Again, 29 people were awarded commendations for the work on this date. And they range from officers to evidence technicians, to detectives, to sergeants, to corporals, all who played a vital role, as well as community service officers. Moving on from incidents, we'll talk about exceptional distinguished service. First, I'd like to recognize Sergeant Jamie Newcomb from Patrol for exceptional service. In addition to his normal duties, he has also volunteered to take on our department fleet, making sure that it's properly serviced and in rolling condition. As well as that, he has taken one of the leads as our staff, as one of our sergeants on the TCERN project, which is modernizing our communications with TCOM. Sergeant Barnes, right there, received the Exceptional Service Award for investigations. She completed her third year in the Investigations Division this past year. Her position as the Lacey Police Department's Detective Sergeant has some of the highest pressure demands of the entire department. In addition to being a Detective Sergeant, she also was the primary press information officer for the department. She coordinated felony investigations, as well as partnering with a variety of local and regional law enforcement partners. That gives you a good idea of that. I'm trying to shorten this up a little bit. This was about an hour-and-a-half ceremony. You don't want to spend an hour and a half here. And lastly, Sergeant Brimmer earned the Distinguished Service Award. He concluded a long career. He was our retiree of the day. He has distinguished himself not only here in the city of Lacey and the county of Thurston, but throughout the state of Washington as a defensive tactics expert and instructor, and really has set the bar very high for all those that follow him. He is one of our inspirational leaders at the department, and he has a series of rules that he put out to younger officers. On his last day, he sent this email out, and frankly, what we'll be doing is posting those rules in the new police department in the gym to provide his legacy. Moving on to Chiefs Awards. So for Chiefs Awards, we assigned John Cox as our volunteer award of the year. John Cox leads. He's our sergeant of volunteers. He has this completely voluntary role. He organizes them, sets the meeting, does all the administrative work, all the unfun volunteer stuff he does to keep the program running along. He's been doing this for over 17 years. Also awarded a Chiefs Award to Austin Newman, our new embedded IS specialist. He's been with us since June of 2022, and he's already made a significant impact to our department. He makes himself ever available to our officers to make sure they're always constantly, their technology is up, their computers are working, their phones are working, and they're in constantly able to update all the information they need to do. Prior to this, we would go days with computers being down, things not being able to be stuck, reports would be stuck, processes would be stuck. He's able to actually troubleshoot problems immediately, and then he goes to work out to find what the source of the problem is so we can stop it from occurring again with other people's computers. So he's been a great value add. Additionally, Officer Broker was recognized for his work as a training officer, a traffic officer, and a patrol officer. He's distinguished himself as being a valued member of the department, constantly exemplifying the department's mission, vision, and values. He's been very proactive and strives to provide the best law enforcement service to our citizens of Lacey. Also recognized Officer Mark Ely, who wasn't able to attend. Again, Officer Ely is a consistent professional, strives to be the best. He is one of our primary trainers. He really portrays ethics and integrity in everything he does. He always does the right thing and takes responsibility for what's going on. The reason why I chose Officer Ely and Officer Broker, they're the unsung heroes in the department, right? They're the ones that are the invisible hand of the department that just keeps things going well. They make sure people are trained properly. They do a lot of the onboarding and really bring people in and mentoring the younger officers so they understand the why of what we do. So then I commended all of our detectives, every last one of them. And as you saw the incidents that we were involved in this year, you get a sense of all the work they did. All of our homicides were solved rather quickly, and some of them were very complex and very few leads to follow. And they've been successful in resolving all those incidents. A number of the things that haven't really reached the press, a number of sexual assault investigations, baby death investigations, those type of things, child abuse investigations that are very taxing on the emotions and require a lot of empathy, working with victims and their families. And it's been amazing what they've been able to accomplish. And our tradition of community caretaking is extended in our detective bureau. It's not just our patrol officers. That cut out 4 pages. Okay. Special recognitions, the Gerald Abernathy Award for volunteers. This is the top volunteer as voted by his peers. This is Randy Young, right there. Randy works more hours than most of our full-time employees. It is amazing. He's usually one of the frontline folks working the front desk. He's first point of contact with a lot of folks walking in off the street. Got a lot of knowledge. He also helps out in detectives, helping a lot of the back-end administrative work up there as well. He is kind of a constant fixture at the department. Be careful of his coffee. It's a little strong. As I said, the Tina Griswold Inspirational Partner Award is awarded on a yearly basis, and it's based upon a vote of the commission members of the department. The award is based on the officers who would like to have most at their side at a critical circumstance, a tough call, or any type of circumstance where they need backup. We had 3 folks. It was a 3-way tie this year, which is interesting. And frankly, rather than have a tiebreaker, I thought they were all worthy of the award. Officer Dave McClurg, Officer Aaron McBride, and Officer Joe Gerkman. We got a couple of those guys up there, which is great. For milestone awards, we had 2 25-year veterans, Keith Mercer and Mike Albers. We had 1 20-year veteran, Ryan Haynes. 15 years of service, we had Brian Dawes, John Mason, Napoleon Parker, Jimmy Williams, Christopher Woodside. And for 10 years, we had Sergeant Joe Walden. Crime Stopper Awards, this was a special award by retired, I believe, Lieutenant, I just blanked on his name, Sorgensen. That's right.
Ed Sorger.
Thank you. And he wanted to recognize Sergeant John Mason and again Randy Young for their work with the Crime Stoppers program. They identify the crime of the week, and as well as doing follow-up on various crimes in our community. Ed Sorger, that's it. Okay, and for the Employee of the Year, as voted on by his peers, is Derek Thompson. Derek Thompson is our traffic officer. He's been here for 5 years, and he's done an awful lot in just those 5 years. It's beginning of 6th year. He is on our SWAT team. He's our one of our defensive tactics instructors. He's our traffic officer. He's our major accident investigation investigator. He's a child safety seat inspector. It goes on and on. He developed an app for our officers' phones to help with bail schedules for writing citations. He is always troubleshooting, going out to try and find innovative solutions to problems, including street racing and other jurisdictions in case we're to come here, ways to address that and prevent it. As you know, we've had many partnerships with car clubs at our jurisdiction for various events. They've often asked me about that type of activity, and we've been able to create partnerships so they don't do it here. So that's a good thing, and that's one of the things that Officer Thompson's been initiated and started doing. Okay, last couple things. I had the opportunity to promote Sergeant Alex Vichek to the position of sergeant. He has been serving as a corporal, and while Sergeant Brimmer was on a leave of absence, he was the acting sergeant for his shift. Alex is a very, very competent, he is really a distinguished officer. He has worked on our community resource unit. He's been a defensive tactics instructor. He is really a bright spot for our department, and I'm very proud that we were able to promote him to sergeant. And retiring is Sergeant Terrence Brimmer, an incredible asset to the department. Really hate to lose him, but he has served, I believe it came out to over 30 years of service. Really, again, one of the great people I really appreciated when I came to the department. He and I were able to spend significant time together, and really helped with bringing me on board and mentoring me to understand the institutional knowledge of the department. So with that, I will close out, and thank you for allowing me to brag about the department.
Thank you for your presentation, and I didn't know there were so many awards given out. That is awesome. I know that the space that you guys work in currently is a little smaller than what you need, and hopefully one day in the near future you will have enough space to accommodate all of your officers and all the work that they do.
Thank you very much. That would be much appreciated, sir.
Before we move on to our next agenda item, I did want to note that we do have two council members online. I know you see that the dais is a little bit light tonight, and we do have Councilmember Greenstein online, and Councilmember Stedman are joining us online, and then Councilmember Kunkel and the mayor have excused absences for tonight. Moving on to our next agenda item, we have public comment. Nobody registered to speak on Zoom, and there were no written comments to read into the record. So with that, is there anybody in this room wishing to address this council tonight? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our next agenda item. In this case, the next agenda item is under resolutions. And tonight we'll be reviewing resolution number 1127, and our finance director, Troy Wu, will be presenting.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Good evening, council members. As the Deputy Mayor said, you're under consideration today is a resolution that will update our city investment policy. This is an annual process that we go through to make sure that our investment policy is up to date. We take a look at new RCWs. We look at the State Investment Board policy as an example. It's much easier for us to be consistent with that in terms of our investment advisory services. This year's updates are very limited and very minor in nature. The first two are on page 8 of 15 in your packet, and they relate to the diversification table, and there's two areas within this table. The first is a change to the minimum rating to municipal obligations. It is a reduction of the minimum rating from AA to single A. You might remember last year we made the same action for corporate investments. So it's very similar to that. These are still very strong investments. In our discussions with the Finance Committee, we do want to stay at that higher level of rating. So we have not actually invested anything at single A, although again, it is still safe. But those yields just aren't there that make up the difference. I'll remind the council and the public that within our policy, our objectives are safety first, then liquidity, and then yield. So we take that very seriously, and we certainly take those recommendations in terms of what the investment policy states. The second area within the table that is changing or proposed to change is actually an increase to some of the quality in terms of the banker acceptance, and we set a maximum maturity of 180 days. There was no maximum maturity before, so this is a more strict move in terms of investment policy change. The final change is really a housekeeping change. It is on page 7 of 15 of your packet, or the investment policy within your packet. It's really changing the reference to the state, which doesn't exist. It does currently state the State Finance Director's Office. This should be State Treasurer's Office, so that's more of a housekeeping change. So those are the three changes that are proposed tonight. So we would ask that you, by motion, approve this and thus change the city's investment policy. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Can I get a motion?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we adopt resolution number 1127, amending the official investment policy of the city.
Second?
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Discussion. Anybody have anything?
Just a quick.
Please go.
Just for the benefit of those listening at home, and also me, when we change from a AA to a single A minus investment, allowable investment types, that increases the number of different investments that we could make, even though we haven't yet gone down to that level of a single A, right? So that gives us more options.
That's correct, and maybe a better way to answer is referring to the corporate investments. We have an approved list, so our investment advisor actually tracks all corporate investments and checks that against the actual policy. And these numbers are from last year, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but just to give you an idea, AA and higher corporate investments out there is a list of less than 20. So that's every corporation in America that issues notes. There's only 20 that qualify for AA and above, or roughly. Going to single A, that increases to right around 35 or so. So we're still talking about
It's still a very exclusive club.
Exactly. So yeah, it's still a very strong rating. Like I said, 35 in terms of corporate investments out there. There's only 35 in the nation. I don't know the similar stats in terms of municipal obligations, but if you think about a municipal obligation, and actually the mayor during the Finance Committee noted that that's even a stronger, and we have much more confidence in that type of investment as well.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, well, it has been moved and seconded. Unless somebody online or anybody has anything further for this housekeeping item. Okay. Well, it has been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. And are there any that oppose? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is under City Manager's Report, and I will hand that off to our interim City Manager. I'm sorry.
We have
missed one?
We have a budget carryover.
Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Under ordinances, we do have ordinance number 1636, our budget carryover amendment. Back to Troy.
Great. Thank you again, Deputy Mayor. For your consideration tonight is an ordinance that will amend the 2023 budget. This is an amendment that is limited to budget appropriations in the 2022 budget that weren't completed for a number of reasons. And we would like to, of course, carry out those initiatives of the council, so we need to carry those over to 2023, where we hope to complete those projects. I've been saying this, I think, for the last 3 years throughout the pandemic and just what's happening out there in the world. 2022 was a weird year. We had supply chain issues that continued that hampered our ability to get projects done. There were workforce issues, and we're still dealing with those as well. So we just haven't been fully staffed either. So we certainly do want to carry out these initiatives and hope you support that as I continue. So again, these are limited to projects and purchases that were adopted last year but weren't completed for a number of reasons. You do have the full details of the amendment in the Exhibit A of the ordinance. I do want to highlight just a few of the more significant initiatives and projects rather than go through the whole list. So I'll point out that the neighborhood grant program includes about a $19,000 carryover. This is an important initiative for the council, so we want to make this program as robust as possible. So we would like to add to this year's grant program. There are a number of amendments related to social services, specifically homeless services. There's a long list, such as shelter services, host homes in partnership with Together. So there's, like I said, there's a number of those. I will point out that as we continue in 2023, we are going to be hiring a social services coordinator. I fully expect that this will be a program that's looked at in detail, and Shannon and her team will come back before council with probably a more methodical program in terms of how we spend these dollars. So while we'll carry these over under last year's budget approvals, I do expect a different proposal to come forward this year. There's about $260,000 in carryovers related to climate action. There are a few different projects related to economic development. We do have really a holding place for opportunities as an example. So there's a $150,000 carryover for economic development investment opportunities. There are a few different transfers. Some of them are significant in nature. For example, under the Criminal Justice Fund, there is a $1.6 million transfer. That's really related to projects that didn't occur in 2022 and will occur in 2023. There's a total of about $4.1 million in carryovers for the police station, kind of a combination between the design of the new police station as well as land acquisition. There's about $500,000 in the carryover for the continued design of the Great Cuyo Community Park Phase 1A. There are a few different carryovers related to the RAC, most significantly $2.3 million for the construction of the parking lot expansion. And the final two comments I have really illustrate the challenges that we've had with supply chain issues. So within the water fund, there's about a $706,000 amendment proposed related to the purchase of water meters and the transmitting devices for our radio read system. We've had a long-standing order for those supplies. They're just now coming in. So these have been on order for, roughly a year or so. Really, like I said, is really illustrative to the challenges we've had in the supply chain. And then finally, in our equipment rental fund, there's a number of vehicles that weren't delivered in 2022, and we hope they'll be delivered here in 2023. So we received very few vehicles in 2022, so you certainly see that within the proposed amendment. So I will again propose that the council adopt the ordinance and amend the 2023 budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I would move to adopt ordinance number 1636, amending the 2023 financial year budget to reappropriate the 2022 budget amounts from projects not completed in 2022.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I think we all saw this coming after last year. I know all the department heads saw it coming after last year, and we can't even get trucks. They canceled our order and upped it 20% and said you can order again. That was awesome. In addition to the radios for the water department and a whole host of other things. Well, thank you for bringing this to us. Anybody else have anything? Councilmember Greenstein and I both sit on that finance committee, and so we've seen this presentation and we saw these things coming.
Yeah, it's really just housekeeping. I mean, this is money that's already been approved and budgeted by this council, so it's just moving it from last year.
Yep. Well, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
Aye.
Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
Now, this time, we get to go to the city manager's report, and I will hand this over to Rick Walk.
Great, thank you, and good evening, Deputy Mayor and Council. We have a couple of items on the city manager's report for action. The first is the allocation agreement for the opioid settlement, and I want to turn it over to City Attorney Dave Schneider to give the background and the request.
Thanks, Rick. Good afternoon, good evening, I should say, Mr. Deputy Mayor and council members. So yes, the opioid litigation settlement is back before us, and this is you'll recall in April of 2022, the City Council authorized the city manager to execute what was called the One Washington MOU agreement, which that agreement was a requirement for the distributor settlement, which later occurred last fall. The One Washington MOU was an allocation agreement whereby that provided a framework for how distributor settlement funds were going to be ultimately allocated throughout the state. Council then in September of 2022 authorized the city manager to enter into a settlement that the Washington Attorney General had achieved for $518 million against the three largest opioid distributors. So there has now, well, that I should say, that distributor agreement has become effective as of December of 2022, and funds have started to begin being distributed to the cities. There's now been a national settlement reached, so beyond just Washington State, but this is a national settlement that's been reached between the major pharmacies and dispensers and then the manufacturers as well. The total share of this settlement for Washington State is $434 million, which amount would be divided evenly, 50-50, between the state and then local jurisdictions. So $217 million would be coming to the cities. It'd be payable over the next 15 years, and payments are anticipated to begin in fall of this year, 2023. So the total settlement requires all Washington cities with a population over $10,000 to join in the settlement. There is a steep drop-off if any jurisdiction does not join in the settlement. And if enough cities didn't join, then the settlement would become void. The deadline for participation is April 18th of this year. Each participating city is required to sign the allocation agreement 2, which provides for the same proportional share as the previous distributor settlement that council entered into last year. Funds must be spent, like the distributor settlement, funds must be spent on approved uses for fighting the opioid epidemic. So the request is for this council to authorize the interim city manager to execute the allocation agreement 2 and all documents necessary to participate in settlements with the 5 settlements, which are with Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, Teva, and Allergan. With that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I will add, the city of Lacey is not an active litigant. The city didn't take its own action to initiate any lawsuits against any of these entities. As such, absent an agreement, the city's not going to be getting any of the funds. So it is recommended from myself and staff that the city authorize the city manager to enter into this agreement.
Which cities in Washington did enter into litigation?
Oh, there's numerous.
Seattle.
I'm assuming Seattle. Yeah, some of the larger cities.
There's more that didn't,
Yeah.
I should say. And that information's in the packet. But
Yeah.
Do we know how the city status is coming along in terms of, how many cities do we have in the state of Washington and what's our commitment level as a state so far? Does anybody really know that answer?
I don't know. Again, we had almost, the distributor settlement did not, my mic's not on. The distributor settlement did not require 100% participation of cities over 10,000. It required, I think, 90%. And that was easily achieved.
Well, that has been achieved.
Yes, and that is already effective. That was for the distributors. That was 2022, the end of 2022. This is specific with the manufacturers and the dispensers, the pharmacies. It does require 100%. I am not aware of any city that is choosing not to participate. We are bringing this before the council early. It's not required to be signed until April 18th, but I think Rick got a call today from the Attorney General's office wondering, hey, how's it going? So we're just trying to be proactive and get this done. I certainly am not aware of any cities that wouldn't participate. My expectation is that they all would.
And one of the values of this too is, as I did get a call from the Attorney General's office, just looking at status and timing, is that it'll bring dollars to the local area that we can utilize for addressing these issues surrounding the opioid pandemic locally. Absent of being a part of the agreement, we would not be able to have that resource, and we would not have that control of how we utilize it to address some of the issues and partner with our other neighboring jurisdictions or providers to provide these resources that get to the streets of the people that need it.
And the use of the funds seems pretty broad in terms of what we're allowed to spend the money on related to addressing opioid use disorders in the community, right?
That's right. It does have to be an opioid-related purpose, treatment, care, recovery services, housing, peer support, children's services.
But
There's
it's
a
pretty
numerous.
flexible as long as it's
Correct.
wrapping around the community
Correct.
that needs opioid use disorder treatment.
In your commentary, you mentioned that if without the participation, there's a steep fall off, and then after that we got to there's full participation. So do I need to ask what a steep fall off means?
Well, no, I think it means what it sounds like it means. Correct. So, I mean, it's 434 million total, and I think there's I could look it up. I
No,
think it's
no,
close to like 10%.
But you said we've met and surpassed those thresholds.
For the distributor
For the distributor
we have.
settlement.
That one's done.
Okay.
So I do not know yet. Again, we're early in the game. I know there's some cities that have already taken action. And I'm, of course, suggesting that this council take action tonight. I'm assuming most of them will probably take action in the next couple of weeks.
So we'll get a kind of a report back on
Correct.
how where we are and that
Yes.
kind of thing.
Yes.
Okay.
I can certainly provide that to council. And I'm sure the Attorney General's office is also going to be, providing us updates.
So, wow, the Attorney General's office did a pretty good job on this.
They did.
They knocked it out of the park.
They did. And again, this one is a national settlement, so
Yeah.
and certainly our Attorney General had a significant role in that.
Okay. With that, do I need a motion for this?
You do. We are
I would
requesting,
move-
okay.
I would move to authorize the interim city manager to execute the allocation agreement and all documents necessary to participate in settlements with Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, Teva, and Allergan.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded, and it seems like we've already had some discussion, but if there's anything anybody would like to add, please do so now. Okay, seeing none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing no opposition, that motion passes unanimously, and we will authorize our interim city manager to execute the allocation agreement. Thank you.
Thank you, council. Our next item on the city manager report is to award a contract to upgrade our citywide ITS detection signals. And I'm going to turn it over to our transportation manager, Martin Hoppy, who I believe is online tonight, to provide the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Deputy Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're recommending that we award Lacey contract PW 2022-16 to low bidders City Electric Company of La Center, Washington, in the amount of $423,960. This is a CMAQ grant that we got in 2020. It was a joint project between Thurston County and the city. Thurston County's intersection is the Carpenter and Martin Way, and the rest of them were kind of scattered throughout the city. Mainly these are intersections that we've been having problems with a couple times a year when the sun sun glare causes the existing cameras to kind of not detect vehicles. These new detectors both have thermal imaging and video detection, so they'll check each other, and they're much better in inclement weather, snow, heavy fog, things like that. We've used them on the Super T project, and they've worked really well, and we've been trying to get them in the other intersections throughout the city. The project was advertised and bids were received on February 23rd. 4 bids were received. Bids range from $423,000 and change to $494,000 and change. City Electric was the low bidder, and the engineer's estimate was $315,000. Although the bids were higher than expected, we could not purchase these detectors with just the match we have to do with this project. And I guess that's my report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
With that,
I
I
would
will
move-
ask for a motion.
I would move to award Lacey contract number PW 2022-16 to low bidder City Electric Company from LA Center, Washington, in the amount of $423,960.
Second.
Well, it has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this topic?
Well, go ahead and get mine
Councilmember
then.
Stedman?
Yeah, I just noticed it was over $100,000 over the engineer's estimate, and you answered the question. So it's unfortunate, but you know, sometimes the way it works.
I forgot to mention one thing. TRPC actually has a new grant program that they were just awarded called the Congestion Reduction Program. We had TAC meeting today, and we're going to discuss at the next month's meeting what to do with that funding. And I think we're fairly high on the list because we could spend the money fairly quickly, and that's what they need to do with that money.
Councilmember Cox?
Thank you. Just two quick questions. Excuse me, what does ITS stand for?
Intelligent Transportation System, basically anything you have to plug in.
Okay. And the other question is, were there other parts of the city considered? Because I noticed there was no Hawks Prairie Business District, there was no Southwest Lacey with the busy Yelm College intersections. Maybe
Well,
they
Yelm
already have
College was-
signals?
The Yeoman College was done with the Super T, and it was kind of a function of how much money was available in the grant. CMAQ funding is kind of odd. It's a boundary that was developed in the late 80s that we have to abide by. When the county and us started talking about it, we were going to try to do the entire Martin Way corridor, but Carpenter and Martin Way was the only intersection within the CMAQ boundary.
Okay, well, y'all, please.
Martin, is this going to align with or help with our approach on signal prioritization that intercity transit is in the midst of trying to get done over the course of the next couple of years? Is this connected to that project to speed up the passage of, high occupancy transportation like buses in Lacey and other parts of the county?
Not really. That program is a different setup out of the controller. This is just going to provide more reliability in certain situations on the signals. What happens with signals when, say heavy fog or something like that, they can't detect shadows of the different vehicles. With the thermal imaging, it'll be able to do that. So, because the way the signals are set up is there's a minimum and maximum green that can be given. And when the detectors can't tell if there's a car there or not, it'll just give them the maximum.
So this is similar to the system that we put in over at, on Martin Way, where you go into Costco and the cars stack up there. Is this similar to that system?
No, actually.
Or is this
the
just kind of
ones
a signal?
Yeah, it's just a detector type. The ones we have right now are Parkside, Neum Highway, and Neum Highway and College.
Eric.
Oh, sorry. Please go ahead.
Maybe if I could clarify. So yeah, this is purely about detection is all. And if you remember, going back a generation, all the detections were loops in the ground, and a vehicle passed over it, and that would detect the vehicle. Next generation was camera detection. So if you imagine, on a TV screen, this camera sees vehicles pull up. But as Martin said, in certain conditions like fog, snow, if the sun's hitting the lens just right, it won't detect it. So if you're watching this on TV, it's just like your TV goes, blurry or black. And so with thermal detection, obviously it's not a visual detection. Well, this will combine both. So all this does is improve the detection of the vehicles that are there. It doesn't have anything to do with the controllers or the signal timing. So it's just purely detection.
I think you answered my next question, which was, what if it's really cold? So we'll actually have both the visual and the thermal. So one or the other will detect someone coming up to the intersection.
Right. So, this is Martin's world, but, if you think of it, what you get to see on TV, this will give you a better picture, so.
It's true.
Okay, well, it has been moved and seconded. You know, I learned in a meeting that Martin has secured something like over $100 million for the city for projects like these in his tenure here. Is that right, Martin?
I think it's over 150 million.
Is it over 150? It's a lot of money.
Been here a long time, I don't know.
Yeah, we're going to put a plaque on his door that says Bank of Martin. So,
Well, it has been moved and seconded for this item, and I guess we'll take a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Are there any that oppose? Seeing none, that item passes unanimously.
Thank you.
All right, and the last item we have on the city manager report, as our Water Resources Manager, Peter Brooks, comes up to the lectern. He's going to provide the council an overview of and a request for authorization to sign a letter of intent for transferring brewery assets rights at the brewery wellfield. So, Peter?
Thank you. Mr. Deputy Mayor, rest of the council. Before you tonight, I have a recommendation that we authorize the interim city manager to draft and sign a letter of intent to transfer the City of Lacey's brewery assets to the City of Tumwater. So as you remember, we've been going through this process of creating an MOU, and in your January 19th meeting of this year, so just about 2 months ago, the City Council authorized the interim city manager to sign that MOA. The MOA, as I told you that night, did not transfer the assets. What it did is it created a framework for how the assets could be transferred, and it also was our agreement that fees and taxes, other things, bills that needed to be paid from all the work we've done with our partners, Tumwater and Olympia Tumwater, basically spotted us the money, so that's getting paid. So the next step, if we want to transfer the assets, is per the MOA, we send a letter of intent to the City of Tumwater stating, yeah, that's what we want to do. This letter of intent will contain 2 conditions. First, that the partners have to come to agreement on the valuation of the assets. And second, that the City Council has to approve the transfer. So with that in mind, we're asking that you approve a letter to be drafted and the interim city manager to sign the letter.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Do you guys have any? Okay, seeing none online. Well, then let us move to do such a thing. So who would like to present a motion?
Mr. Deputy Mayor, I would happily move to authorize the interim city manager to draft and sign a letter of intent to transfer the City of Lacey's brewery assets to the City of Tumwater.
Second?
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? I have a couple of things. We've been at this for a while.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we have.
I remember we were talking about water wheeling, and we were talking about how can we get to the water, and can we transfer the water to those guys, and they can give us some water, and we had some lot of water discussions over this one item. And so if the City of Tumwater is interested, then this just puts us in a position to be able to sell our interest to them,
Right.
and basically just kind of clean our hands of the rights that we acquired so many years ago.
Right, the tangible assets would be sold presently, and then City of Tumwater would increase their water production and develop our share of the water right. So it's what in the water world we call perfected. When it's perfected, then they would basically assume the ownership of it. If we tried to do that before it was perfected, it could cause complications and some water right could be lost. So that's the way we would proceed.
Gotcha.
Well, we previously authorized the city manager to transfer funds to compensate for our portion of the maintenance of the wells maybe a month or 2 ago. Is that right?
Right, it was the decommissioning of wells, it was paying for stormwater fees, it was things of that sort.
Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay, well, it has been moved and seconded. So all those in favor of such an action, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes unanimously, and we will authorize the interim city manager to draft and sign a letter of intent to transfer the City of Lacey's brewery assets to the City of Tumwater.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks.
Thank you, Peter. That concludes the city manager report.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is standing general committees, starting with the Finance Committee. I am on that committee, and so is Councilmember Greenstein. He is a senior member of that committee. But I do believe the things that we covered in that committee, we made action on tonight. But Councilmember Greenstein may have a couple additional items that he'd like to share. Is there anything else you'd like to share, sir?
No, not on that one,
Okay.
Mr. Deputy Mayor. We, like you said, we did cover those this evening already, so no reason to cover them again.
All right, good enough. Our next item is General Government Committee.
That one is me. General Government met on February 28th. We had a one-item agenda, which was a briefing on crime stats for 2022 from our chief. In the big picture, crime overall is up quite a bit in some areas, mostly in property crime. Violent crime has not really had the significant increase. The good news is that our crime rate in the city of Lacey was still lower than most of our neighbors and certainly lower than the state average. There's several things that have attributed to these increased crime rates. Some of that is some of the actions that have been taken over the last couple of sessions by our state legislature. But again, there are some of the numbers were a little bit alarming. There's been a lot more car theft. There's been a lot more theft in general, but no significant increase in violent crime. Chief, do you have anything you want to add on this?
Thank you, Councilman. So yes, we discussed crime on the 28th, and there are a lot of causative factors to this. Someone called there's a national increase in crime coming out of COVID. However, the crime rate in the state of Washington is surpassing that, and part of that has to do with accountability. And fortunately, in the current session, the pursuit bill that's being considered now would return us to a reasonable suspicion standard from a probable cause standard. But also allow different categories of crimes to enable pursuits when appropriate, when the necessity to capture the suspect is more important than the potential risk posed by the pursuit itself. As you know, the City of Lacey Police Department does not engage in a lot of pursuits. We never have. But there still has always been the potential to be able to do that. Currently, the status is once a suspect gets into a vehicle, they pretty much know they're not going to be pursued by pretty much any law enforcement agency in the state of Washington, except under extremely limited circumstances. It is almost nearly impossible to do. So for most crimes. Fortunately, this bill under consideration looks like it has some momentum, and we're hoping that it does pass, and that would help with this situation immensely. Also,
Chief.
the only other issue I would also speak to would be the Blake decision, which has to do with personal possession of narcotics. The current law is due to sunset this July. Right now, it's a simple misdemeanor and requires a number of deferrals before a person can actually be prosecuted for the crime of simple possession of a narcotic. Again, that would be a simple misdemeanor. Again, the legislation under consideration now would be a great fix to that. It would provide a benefit to people arrested for the crime of possession of narcotics. It would be a gross misdemeanor. However, if they completed rehabilitation and substance abuse counseling, then that would be cleared from their record. That conviction would not appear on the record as a criminal offense. So again, it would revert back to a medical solution versus a criminal one. So very much supportive of that. Again, that would be a big value add to our current situation. A lot of property crime obviously is driven by people that are trying to get property, sell that property money to go purchase narcotics. That's obviously one of the drivers. And we'd like to have that addressed as well. So fortunately, there are some legislation currently being considered by our legislature that would address this situation.
Thank you, Chief. Hopefully, those will pass out of our legislature here this session. So they do have momentum and looks like they have a good chance. So we'll see how that goes. But that is my report.
Thank you, Councilmember Greenstein. Next, we have Land Use and Environmental Committee.
Righty. This committee met on February the 28th, and the meeting was given over to an update on the climate action regional implementation. We had Grant Beck, our Planning and Development Services Manager, and Senior Planner Hans Shepard. They gave us an overview of the changes made to the interlocal agreement for the Climate Action Plan. This involves the cities of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston County, and the Thurston Regional Planning Council. The main topics include evolving the implementation strategy, a proposed organizational structure, and Thurston Climate Mitigation Plan implementation works. Also, staff has been working to formulate a partnership with Puget Sound Energy to offer an expanded rebate program. This is based on offerings that Puget Sound Energy currently has available. The rebate programs are related to retrofits of homes, weatherization, windows, space heaters, water heaters, thermostats, and appliances. Thanks.
And next we have Transportation Committee, and that is my assignment. The Transportation Committee did meet on March 7th. We did get an update on all the city's projects that are currently underway, including Carpenter Road Utilities Overlay, 2022 overlay for utilities, the sidewalk repairs for 22, the electric vehicle charging stations, which hopefully will be done this quarter and go online, the citywide ITS upgrades, which we looked at earlier tonight, Golf Club Road, Lacey Boulevard utility paving, the Slater-Kinney Pacific pole replacement. I don't know if you guys saw the traffic light on Slater-Kinney and Pacific. For some reason, it just keeps getting hit. And so we've decided that we need to move it back onto Jiffy Lube's lot. Is that correct? And in moving it back onto Jiffy Lube's lot, hopefully it will mitigate some of the cost of the continual repair of that pole. And then the 2023 Mullen Road sewer improvements. I did get this big packet. Audrey was nice enough to print it out for me for the meeting, and there is just a lot of stuff in there. There's a lot of things happening in terms of transportation in the city, so when you see our progress, please excuse us for all the progress that we were making to make these roads a little more easy to travel. And that is my report. Next, we have boards, commissions, and committee reports. Usually up first is the mayor. He is excused absence as he is doing a ceremony. Next is myself, and I report out on EDC. I reported out on EDC last time that we had a council meeting, but between then and now, I did get invited to be a part of the EDC executive committee, which is pretty cool because a lot of things happen in that meeting that we only get pieces of in the regular EDC meeting. So I am now a part of that committee, and I will be able to hopefully give you more full reports and maybe even allude to some upcoming things by being a part of that. Next, I have just a little bit to say about the LTAC committee, in that we did have the Lake Fair LTAC meeting. For those who are aware, there's nothing really to report yet. There is some conversation that needs to continue. There have no real decisions have been made, but funding is our key issue that we're discussing in those conversations. So once we do have something solid to report, I will report back to you on those things. And that is my report. Next, we have Councilmember Cox.
Thank you. Two reports tonight. The first is from the March 8th meeting of the Regional Housing Council. We approved the charter that incorporates formation of two new advisory boards, one for homeless services and one for affordable housing. The updates strengthen jurisdiction representation requirements for the advisory boards. This means that It is now required that each participating jurisdiction have representation on each of the boards, and that seats will be held open until qualified representatives can be found and appointed. We also heard a presentation on the 5-year fair housing plan. This is required of cities, counties, and housing authorities that receive funds from the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. The plan identifies priorities and sets goals for a 5-year horizon. And there will be hearings and other opportunities for public input later this month. And finally, Aspen Court, which is formerly the Days Inn on Quinault Drive, is undergoing remediation work and should be ready to receive occupants from freeway encampments in June. So that's that report. And the Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, Thurston County Clean Water Alliance, otherwise known as LOT, also met on March 8th. It was a very long day. We learned a little bit about the next phase of master planning. This is something LOT began in 2018 in an effort to identify and evaluate options to meet future capacity needs. It was done in 3 phases, and phase 3 now is underway and includes environmental review and public engagement. We authorized the executive director to execute a $10 million construction loan agreement with the Washington State Public Works Board for phase 2 digester system improvements. We also awarded a contract for phase 2 of the collection system piping rehabilitation project to Allied Plumbing and Pumps LLC, doing business as Allied Trenchless of Wenatchee, for the bid amount of $684,550.20, which includes state sales tax. We received a program update and highlights from the annual pre-treatment report recently submitted to Ecology. In addition to domestic sewage, LOT's Bud Inlet Treatment Plant and the Martin Way Reclaimed Water Plant received wastewater discharges from hundreds of industrial users. And in order to protect the treatment processes and the quality of the biosolids that we produce, the state requires that LOT and its partner jurisdictions implement a pre-treatment program to control and enforce, if necessary, industrial discharges. And I'm saving what I think was the most interesting report of the night for last. In December, LOT began sampling for the Washington State Department of Health's wastewater-based epidemiology program, which is a local tool for health departments to determine trends related to disease-causing pathogens. And the program is supported by the Federal Centers for Disease Control and Prevention through the National Wastewater Surveillance System. So currently, Washington State program examines trends in COVID-19 levels in communities to help with COVID response. So twice a week, LOT gathers samples of untreated wastewater and sends them to the state public health lab in Shoreline. And once the samples are analyzed, the Department of Health calculates trends of community infection and shares the results with the CDC. They also work directly with local health departments to help interpret the trends and aid public health entities in COVID-19 response. So this can provide a 7 to 10 day forecast for local health departments of spikes or drops in COVID cases. So while we're currently only testing for the virus that causes COVID, there's a possibility that the CDC may expand this testing in the future to include other disease-causing pathogens. So predicting public health from public waste. That's my report.
Awesome. So the charters were approved through RHC, which is great, and then we'll have representation on each board?
This charter is moving forward from the boards that are currently appointed. So it'll be reviewed twice a year, and we will Rick's looking like he wants to say something. No, okay. It'll be reviewed twice a year, more often if necessary, and we will, it'll happen gradually.
Okay. All right, well, we'll get back to that as we
Okay.
move on through that. Next, we have Councilmember Greenstein.
Thank you. So I have just one committee to report out on tonight. Medic One EMS met yesterday. The most important thing I think from that meeting was, and you've heard me talk in the past about manning the entryway for the hospital. So we were having problems with long delays for ambulances when they showed up at Providence, sometimes several hours before they could actually discharge their patient into the hospital. So to help get those ambulances back on the road, Medic One started manning and having a 2-person team actually at the entrance to treat patients, so you can empty them out of take them out of the ambulance. The ambulance could go up on for its next call, and those 2 paramedics, EMTs, could actually hold that patient until there was room in the emergency room for them. The really good news is that process has been taken over now by Olympic Ambulance under a contract from Providence. So no longer is the taxpayer paying for this service. This is now being paid for by Providence to handle that entryway treatment. So that was a really big step. In the first 7 weeks of this project, it has saved over 130 hours of time that ambulances would have been there that are now able to back out on the road again. So a really big impact on the system. A couple other quick things from the meeting. There is paramedic testing scheduled for the end of the month. There's currently an EMT class going on with 16 students, so we're hoping to have quite a few new EMTs coming out shortly. And the ALS manager position, which we've been trying to fill since the ALS manager was promoted to the executive director position upon Kurt's retirement, has been reclassified to allow for some different avenues of recruitment. And then we did end the meeting with a small ceremony and coffee and some cookies and such for Kurt for his retirement for a very long and great career, and he just did a great job of taking care of EMS and Medic One for the last several years. And that is my report.
Okay. Next, we have Councilmember Stedman. Is he still with us? I don't see him on screen. Mike, are you still there?
Am I frozen? Is that correct, me?
Yep, you're up.
All right, sorry guys. All right, real quick, just an announcement. I wanted to show everybody that the Gold Star Memorial was installed today and yesterday. It's final and complete except the landscaping. They have a gala on the 31st and a dedication. The dedication is at noon on site at Civic Plaza Park. And then the evening gala is at the community center at 5 p.m. in Lacey. Only have one report, and I'll try to do it as just as possible. It was Law and Justice met today at 4. We had several items on the agenda, and a lot of it had to do with ensuring fair and equal treatment in law and justice. Because you're using words that are, like disparity and disproportionate words like that, and we want to make sure, because this committee's is being really careful in this community of everybody being on the same page of what those words mean and the intent behind them and the policies and procedures and everything. So like data trends and strategic planning, when we're using these words, they can be misinterpreted. The good example that the sheriff gave was that if you had 3 people commit a crime that were from Pierce County and they came down in Thurston County, whether they're a person of color or Caucasian or a different race or whatever, that they commit were arrested and brought down into the jails and stuff, that could make a disproportionality in data trends and stats and stuff like that, or vice versa. So anyways, and then if we went up there and use resources, go up there and arrest them and bring them back down? Or did we, call them, the county, and have them do it for us? Were we doing it because of disparity? Would we do one decision because you're dealing with 3 Caucasians different than if you were dealing with 3 people of color, or vice versa? So it's really important to ensure that we have safe, secure,
Connection. Safe, secure internet connection.
system.
We will,
Yeah, and I know I'm probably breaking up some, but that took up the majority of the meeting. They did, and it really affects data trends, and a whole host of other things. So it's important that we all understand and we're on the same page with these different words. And then, other than that, we had a review on legislative review on House Bill 1077. It's expanding court services for
wait for it. I don't know if he's going to make it back this time. That might be the end.
I didn't get much information on, but it had to do with minors and sentencing extensions. It was House Bill 1324. Chief, feel free to jump in if you think you might be able to do it a little bit better.
Okay, Councilmember Stedman, if you can hear me, you're freezing up about every 20 seconds at this point. So we're going to move on to the next person on the list, but maybe next time you're in council chambers, you can finish this report. We're probably getting 70%, but it feels like the 30 that we're missing is pretty vital. So thank you so much. And you froze again. Okay, so Councilmember Kunkel is absent, excuse absence. And next we have Councilmember Vasquez.
Thank you. I have a couple of reports tonight. We had an intercity transit meeting on Wednesday, and we heard some great stuff. We got an update about the van pool ridership. It's up. More people are riding vans. That's exciting. It may have something to do with the simplified fare structure. It was kind of hard in the past to figure out how much it would cost to participate in van pool, and so we kind of overhauled that cost structure so that it is more comprehensible to a regular person who doesn't work for intercity transit. It was also Ann Freeman Manzanera's last meeting. She's been sort of an institution at intercity transit for a long time, and so she's retiring, and so we said some kind words and wished her farewell. Emily Bergkamp is going to be picking up the interim position as executive director of intercity transit, so I'll be working with her while we look for Ann's permanent replacement. We also heard that intercity transit is now at about 78% of pre-COVID service levels. As many of you have heard me report out on before, we don't have enough bus drivers to get back up to those pre-COVID service levels. So they continue to try to look for people. If you know anybody that wants to be a bus driver, send them their way, because as we get more drivers trained, as they're able to fill some of their vacancies, they're able to expand services. So they're speeding up Route 64, which is a Lacey route. They're going to be putting Route 60 back on Ensign Road due to a kind of a diminishment of some of the safety concerns previously that had them change the route. And yeah, they're also going to be extending evening service. So it's a good thing that we're starting to be able to hire drivers. They have the money to hire more drivers. They just don't have the people yet. So they're working on that. We also got an update on some of frankly, the heroics that bus drivers have demonstrated over the last year. We got to watch some really amazing videos, kind of like the video that the chief showed of our officers doing amazing heroic things, where bus drivers were swerving out of the way when people landed in their lane within seconds very responsibly. And we got to watch a video of one of the bus drivers for intercity transit actually seeing someone standing on an overpass on Slater-Kenny and looking as if they were about to jump off of the overpass, and she stopped her bus and got out and prevented someone committing suicide. So it was really amazing. And so that person has been recognized. But buses are a really vital part of our community, and the bus drivers do a lot of work for us out there. We've also, speaking of, what's that called? Supply chain problems. Speaking of us not being able to get vehicles, Intercity Transit had ordered dial-a-lift vans about 2 years ago, and they're finally going to be getting 28 dial-a-lift vans, which is good news. And that's it for Intercity Transit. I have no ORCA report. I do have 2 other reports, though. So Thurston Regional Planning Council, we had an update from the National League of Cities on a host of different federal transportation funding opportunities. So I can share that slide deck with anybody who's interested. But the summation of the presentation is there's a lot of options right there right now, federal funding for transportation projects. We also got an update on the Regional Transportation Plan. There's a 2022 amendment cycle, and one of the areas where there was a lot of discussion is Olympia's recommendation to remove the log cabin connector from the transportation plan, the Regional Transportation Plan, and Lacey has sent a letter to Thurston Regional Planning Council indicating that we would like to maintain it on the project list for the future, as Lacey has already done some investments in creating that east to west connection. And TRPC's staff recommendation is also to keep that project on the list. So we didn't take action on the amendment plan at that meeting, but it's going to come up in a future meeting. So we also heard climate mitigation update. The very short summation of that was we're not where we need to be. We're not seeing reductions in carbon emissions at the levels that we need to in order to attain our goals under the climate mitigation plan. But Allison Osterberg, who gave the presentation, still is very hopeful that with some of the investments that we're making into things like shifting away from natural gas and toward electrification of some of our buildings, that we're going to start seeing bigger gains, like being able to reduce carbon emissions. And then the Board of Health also met this week, so thank you for your grace on this long report. But we issued a proclamation. We wanted to recognize that on March 31st, there's a national celebration. There's the Trans Day of Visibility, just recognizing the valuable contributions of the trans community to our cities and counties and our communities. And frankly, the fact that there are a lot of efforts nationally to reduce access to healthcare services for the trans community, and that is a public health issue. And luckily in Washington State, there are protections for the trans community, but that's not true in many places. We also got a sobering briefing on the impacts of the opioid and fentanyl epidemic in Thurston County. I don't know if anyone saw the Olympian article, but the coroner came and gave us a report on some of the recent deaths in the county jail related to fentanyl use, and fentanyl deaths have more than doubled. We had 55 in 2021, and we had 114 in 2022, and he said that the trend line continues to go upward. It's very scary. We also heard from the Sheriff's Department on the task force to address the opioid crisis, and one of the things that they shared was that they just need more people to be working on this because there's such a huge growth in the problem in the community. So, lastly, we heard about some permitting options for temporary food establishments and noxious weed prescriptions. So I'm learning a lot on the Board of Health. There's all kinds of things that group considers. Thank you. That's my report.
I just have one. So the bus drivers, obviously, Intercity Transit needs bus drivers. It's a critical need right now. How are they pushing that out? How are they getting that intel out into the community?
It's me. They're paying me. No, just kidding. I just try to work that in every time I talk about it. But they're posting ads. They do have some communications going out on social media. And they're also just asking people to tell friends, colleagues, folks that may have experience driving to look them up because they're a great employer.
Yeah.
They have really satisfied employees. They have an excellent benefits package. So
Bus drivers make a pretty good sum. I noticed the traffic is up out there on the roads. And I would like a copy of the NLC slide deck. I am the chair of the Transportation Committee, and maybe we can get Martin Opo for $200 million if there's enough funds available in there. And no, we are not quitting on the log cabin road thing. At least that's my opinion. That with that, we've made it to the end of our agenda. And if nobody has anything further, it looks like, staff, thank you for being here and being willing to be thrown into the mix as we give our reports and talk about different things that you guys have brought to us and so on and so forth. So thank you for being generous and courteous enough to indulge us in those things. But if there's nothing further, I am going to say our famous tagline, Lacey, you keep it classy, and I will call this meeting adjourned.